Hey guys, and welcome to Live Good Enough, the podcast. My name's Ross. This handsome chap on the other side here is Joe, and we're going to talk to you today about a few things. But firstly, what I want to do is give a bit of a background about Live Good Enough. And if you've come here today, maybe you've seen an article on the website which we've just launched. And really, it's in response to some of the messaging that we're getting today. You know, when we look at our social media feeds, when we look at other platforms, we're inundated with, if you're not making 10 figures a sorry, 10k a month, not 10 figures a month, 10k a month, if you're not got a body of an athlete, if you're not optimal nutrition, all these things, which can be great for some people, and some people find them really inspiring and they could really run with it. But I feel that there's some of us who have maybe tried these things and maybe just hit against the upper brick wall more often than not, and are left kind of feeling, right, if I can't do that, what can I do? And both Joe and I think, have been on a journey whereby over the past so many years, we've come to the point where, little and often, sharing out all the things that we can do in our life, living good enough in each of those areas on a more of a balanced way, can really give us some success. And what success means to us is to have a nice balanced life where we can do lots of different things, where we don't have to do just one thing and really push at it. So, Joe, anything you want to add to that?
No, thank you, Ross, and awesome to be here. And yeah, I think good enough has been something that's kind of defined probably a lot of my years to date. Definitely, I've looked at it more with a negative lens, perhaps, and basically, I would say never felt good enough in one sense. And then now, actually learning that good enough is good enough, and actually, what does that mean to me? Has been more sort of the journey that I've kind of been on. The other thing I would just add, and maybe it's relevant for me and you personally, is our relationship with ADHD, and how that may also be part of this journey too. And it's maybe no coincidence that we're doing this, sharing this, because of some of the struggles we perhaps have had or challenges we face in different environments. I'm not saying that's as a result of or responsible for by, but it encompasses who we are.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And we're kind of on different stages of that journey. I know you're a bit further down the line than me. I'm kind of still on that waiting list, ready to, have that chat with the assessments. But yeah, I think it's really prevalent. And, just to give you a bit of an update as to around what the website is. So Live Good Enough, you can get over there on the website. And really, we push an article, a conversation every day around a host of different subjects, but always with that balanced view. Always with that view of, yes, this is a really good idea. Maybe there's a con to that. Maybe there's a pro to that. Looking at the wider picture of everything, and hopefully, it'll gauge conversation with yourselves at home, with your friendship groups, with your loved ones. Because I really do think that, with balance, we can live a really great life. So we're going to jump into some of the things that we've been speaking about this week. And on Monday, we shared an article, Is Happiness a Choice? Exploring the Equation for Happiness. And really what we're talking about here is kind of like, we've all heard it before, happiness is a choice. But sometimes when you're in the thick of it, that's really tricky to kind of comprehend. And I know in my experience, it's when you're in the thick of it, when you're in the thick of a challenge or a problem, and someone might say to you, oh, can you choose happiness? Why don't you choose happiness? And it's like, well, I'm trying to, but things are getting in the way. Has that been the same kind of situation for you, Joe?
100%. I mean, I'd go as far as to say, like, we haven't even spoken about language on this podcast, but it's like, fuck off. I'm trying to get through my life right now. I can't choose to do anything. Is how it probably for me has felt in those moments when I probably needed to find a way, or choose to find a way, of seeing it from a different perspective. I still think that that's the case. Like all the way that we talk about happiness, for me, it's basically been redefining what happy actually means, as been my route to happiness, I wouldn't say route. I wouldn't say I don't even know if you could define what happy is. It's certainly not one thing. I don't think. I think it's different things for lots of people, and I think a really interesting topic to dig into. A really interesting question, and one that I don't think there is ever going to be a definitive answer to. But I think that from my own personal experience, it's been a driver of constant stress, and at the heart of that has been guilt of thinking, but I am like I do have a roof over my head. I am lucky to be in a job. I have a wonderful wife and a family. And so why aren't I just content and happy with that? And why am I feeling
Mm.
like that's not good enough? For example, or how can I? And I think this. So for me, there was a quote from it was a TED talk a few years ago. I can't remember his name, but it was stuck with me ever since. And it was sort of it said, um, happiness doesn't bring greater gratitude. Gratitude brings greater happiness. And that was
Yeah.
literally it. And it was just so simple. And I thought, you know what?
Mm.
And I've tried to practice that. And if you can find gratitude, I believe, in the smallest of
Mm.
things, it is a practice. It's not something, it's something you have to do. Again, I'm not saying go and start a gratitude journal. I'm not saying go and do all these things. I'm literally just saying if we could recognize gratitude a little bit more, a very small thing might make a bigger difference in the longer term.
Mm. No, definitely. And I think for me, in the past, I kind of saw, happiness would be a point in which you reach. But now I'm more of the thinking of it's an ongoing daily thing where you do small things every day to give a sense of contentment. I like that word contentment, I think, rather than happiness. Happiness to me always seems like a kind of like a thing that you would achieve at some certain point in time, where content means kind of like, on a day-to-day basis, am I feeling good, am I feeling healthy, all those sorts of things. And as a result of that, what do I need to do? So for me, it feels kind of a incremental thing, I think, rather than something that we kind of achieve to. And the reason for this article was that I came across, you guys listening might have come across this chap, Mo Gaudat, who was a chief business officer at Google X and author of Solve for Happy. He's got another book out now on stress, I think. And he has an equation which is happiness equals perception of events minus the expectations. So in simpler terms, Mo believes that our happiness is determined by the difference between how we perceive our life events and how our expectations of how life should be. If our reality exceeds our expectations, we'll feel happy. We feel happy. If it falls short, we don't. So I think there's a lot in this. So, what are our expectations? Are we putting too heavy or an expectation on what we should be? We often speak about shoulding all over yourself. I should do this, I should do that. And I've learned over a period of time that trying just to help and use my language to a more kind of compassionate way is kind of the key in this. What do you think about this equation?
I love it. I have to say, yeah. I mean, it really resonated with me, and it also, again, then I constantly ask the question of why, because then again, like as you've just
Mm.
said, the language of I should have done X, I should have done Y. If only it had been, um, is as you say, a setting myself up for failure based on an expectation of what the outcome should have been versus on
Yeah.
setting a much lower bar for success, which is obviously again when one of the challenges which I'd love to just dig into is that this doesn't mean that you can't not be successful or strive
Mm.
for greater
Mm.
performance. And I suppose for me there
Mm.
is this tension, and it's where does that line cross? How do you both be successful and everything else, and take this approach, which is to not have to not beat yourself up if you do not meet the targets which you set, basically, because your expectations outweighed the reality, and to try and be more pragmatic, more realistic about perhaps the outcomes. And what he says is that if we all did that all the time and were lowering expectations everywhere, then we wouldn't be as disappointed, and therefore we wouldn't
Mm.
feel so hard. And I think my question I love to dig into is the okay, well, why was I doing that in the first place? Why did I have that expectation around it? And most often, and I'm only speaking personally, but it's about my own behaviour. So I'm not talking about like
Mm.
what happens to me externally. I'm talking like what I do, how I am as a dad, how I am as a husband, or how I am, in what all these things are things that there's no one else saying you should have done X or you should have done Y. It's me, and so that's the thing that's been more interesting for me is like why was that the case in the first place?
Mm. No, definitely. And I think this kind of echoes, when I start to think about, what did I want to achieve around live good enough as well, because, there could be a perception that it's kind of like, I'll just let things go and let things be as they are and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, for anyone listening or watching to this, I don't want you to take my ease of tone for any lesser, for any less of drive for achievement or success. It's just like, what is that success and achievement? It's not just for us, I believe, in one area. And how do we measure that? We don't measure that in one area. We measure it about the breadth of the life that we have.
Yeah.
You know, you hear many people talking who are very high up, number ones in business, but when then, you know, something had to fall by the wayside, the family or those sorts of things. So, and what I personally want to achieve is that, yes, there will be success and moving forward in my life, but it will be across the breadth of my life, where I feel that I'm contributing to all those different areas. If you've been intrigued by the article or this conversation around happiness, you know, if you're listening on Spotify, you can leave us a little voice message on Spotify, or if you're on the article yourself, you can just leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts about happiness, but we're going to move on. And the next one article we had was my thing where I'm tackling loneliness. That's what it was. It was all about loneliness. So this is the thing. So there have been parts and periods of my life and quite more recently where I've felt loneliness to quite a considerable extent. And what I found is that through that period of time, what I needed to do was to kind of look at my needs that I have from day to day in lots of different areas. And when I did that, I kind of see them as buckets sometimes, you know, all the different buckets around me about all the different areas. And when I looked at those things, some of them were getting quite low. Those buckets were getting low. And what I found is when I tried to lift some of the things in those buckets, you know, lift the levels of water perhaps in those buckets, then that loneliness subsided. And I think for me in the past, what I felt is that if there was a period of loneliness, it must be one thing. It must be this, it must be that. You know, I kind of concentrated on that. But in fact, what I found with some support I had at the time was that look at these other areas, you know, how are you sleeping? What are you putting in your mouth when you eat? You know, are you moving each day? Are you getting together with different communities? You know, what is your output like in that respect? And for me, you know, the considerably low one was around community. I think sometimes when we work a lot and we've got a family, you know, sometimes, you know, reaching out to friends or community can be quite low sometimes because your time is consumed around that area. So this article was all about, you know, is the answer to loneliness, could the answer to loneliness, or at least a starting point, be around looking at those needs which may be unmet at that time? Joe, I welcome your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I love this approach. And again, for anyone listening who's outside of Suffolk, we're both in Suffolk, and we're both probably aware of Suffolk Mind, who have used this actually a framework around unmet needs, which I really, really like, because it forces you to think about what are the areas in my life that I might not be getting enough of. And the idea is that there are maybe like say 15 areas or sort of emotions that we might need to pull into, whether that be around compassion, whether it be around exercise, and we're saying lots of different compartments. And I definitely agree. Most of the time, we're all in a step. I personally, again, can only speak from personal experience, and this doesn't mean that I'm saying it's the only way, but that if there is something I'm struggling with, then it is because there is an unmet need, or there's a bucket, as you've described it, that is not being currently filled. And you know, one thing that you mentioned at the start of this second piece was about exercise potentially, or even your body and how you feel and tired. And one of the biggest sort of I suppose breakthroughs for me was about acknowledging that body and mind are one, and that the impact of some of the things that I might not be doing have such a massive impact on the other that seem completely unrelated. And I think I think the area that this taps into loneliness and what you're talking around, connection with people or socialization or any of those things, they don't just mean being in places where there are lots of people. It might be having a quality conversation with one person for 5 minutes a day. Might be not actually. It might not even be speaking. It might be listening. It might be not hearing someone else and just being heard. So there's lots of things that I think ways that you could take this in terms of that, what loneliness is, and it looks different for everyone. I don't subscribe to the theory that it's only old people that are lonely or anyone else. I think we can all be lonely,
No, not at all.
irrespective of however we look on the outside. Certainly, how we might look on social media, and it's more of a mindset than anything else.
Yeah.
It contributed mainly with some other factors, whether that be around your geography and maybe resources. But I think that loneliness is not something that can be defined by one way.
Yeah, the other thing the article delves into is around social media, because I think it's quite easy to just say, oh, it's because we just use social media now and we're not in person. And I think some of that is right. I think sometimes in modern society, we rely on that technology for either to save time or to do other things. And as part of that, maybe our interactions from day to day are a little flippant, or a quick text or a like, or that kind of thing. But I think there's a next step up from that. I think there's a way in which we can converse in the way that we do now. We're using technology, but we're having a one-to-one conversation. And I think that could be a next step up from that as well. But, social media and electronic communication also serves a great benefit for those people who maybe do have, like you say, location restrictions, or maybe have a disability which enables them to thrive using these communication methods. So there's lots of different things to think about. But yeah, it's really interesting, because I think sometimes social media is the one to quickly jump on. But I think, it's not for me, it's not around that. It's around just putting time aside to be with someone else and to have that conversation.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, leave that there, I think.
Perfect. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about, on Wednesday we talked about smartphones. Now, for me, Joe, you're younger than me, so you'll probably remember this as well, but the moment Steve Jobs went on the stage and released the iPhone, the first iPhone, it was like something that had never been seen before. The fact that there was a keynote about a phone, or what even was a phone at that point. We had buttons and Blackberries and all that kind of stuff. But the amount of new tech that was kind of unveiled at that moment was revolutionary. But flip on to 2024, and is the modern new iteration of mobile phones, are they worth shouting and screaming about? My experience in more recent times is that, a new phone comes out and that there isn't the leaps that there was before, but there is small iterations of little things that often come out of it. And I just wonder, whether, for many over a period of time, the smartphone in some respects has been the status symbol, to walk in the office with the latest phone, and for people to say, oh, can I have a look, and that kind of stuff. Are we moving past that? Has that gone? Because I think there are other options now where people are thinking about lots of different other considerations, where maybe that's not the case. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I completely agree. I think you're right, like absolute watershed moment, the iPhone, how that changed everyone's lives, and also I'd say in a certain part of the world, in a certain demographic, in a certain part of society that can afford that access to that. And I think that's the massive thing. Like, are we seeing democratization of the same level of technology? I'd argue probably yes, we have done, in a much broader way, obviously not facilitated just by Apple, but by lots of other brands coming into the market and giving comparable products. But which has meant that the same levels and leaps and bounds of technology where we come aren't going to be in the same level of hardware. So hardware is one thing, isn't it? Rather than the software and the tools that we can use on the phones. And even I think that's a lot where we see innovation now is less so in the the physical side of things, and much more so in that. But I think the area of smartphones that we're tapping into, that's sort of touching on very lightly, but one, I don't personally don't think it's a status symbol anymore, because it's now attainable. And not only attainable, it's that everyone has one we have to be of a certain, and so therefore, what's the next thing? And it becomes like, okay, well, it's no longer smartphones. It could be gym membership. It could be, what's the thing now that I really want? It could be, again, and I'm going to use, drinking AG1. It could be, what are the other things that I might not have even heard of that I can't now access, that are unattainable, which once were like more aspirational. So that's one area. And I think the other is that because of the negatives that we have seen, like, the amazing power they have, but equally this sort of balancing view of what impact are smartphones actually having on our lives, and
Yeah.
recognizing that we have agency in deciding what role they play and what role are they potentially, and particularly for me, dad of two boys, what role are they going to play for my kids? And what do I
Mm.
want at that? And I know that I'm addicted to my smartphone. Like I am awful with it. I don't want that for them. So I'm going to have to work out how I could break up with my smartphone first. And then, and it isn't just probably them never having one, because that's not going to be a result. Yeah,
Mm.
lots of areas that probably it affects in different stages of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, the article delves into a lot of different options around, one of the things that seems to be on the rise at the moment is the use of dumb phones or feature phones. And so we're going back to the old Nokias. And if you look at Nokia's kind of new marketing campaigns, they are playing on the fact of, like, that you don't need to, all these other bells and whistles, you don't need them. I think there's JOMO now, the joy of missing out. That's the new thing that they're using to market their campaigns. Other options there on a more kind of fiscal level are things like using reconditioned phones. There's an impact obviously to the environment and that, because the production of new phones and that kind of thing, and also using older models. I think in the past, if the smartphone platforms kind of like gave your phone a end life by not supporting its software. But I think, looking now for like this, I think the model that Google just recently introduced with their Pixel phones was that you would buy a phone knowing that it would be supported until for like something crazy, like 8 years or something like that, which is crazy. So I think there's lots of different things to think about. If you've just bought a new smartphone, a new iteration, maybe you had the one before, let us know why. Let us know why you made that choice. Put it in the comments, leave us a message on Spotify. We'd love to know on all about that. Okay, and then the next day, which was Thursday, yesterday, and we were talking about friendships, friends. Now, it's good to have lots of friends. It could be really great to have one friend, but how many friends do we need to really live well? I think there's a lot of conflicting kind of arguments around this thing. Some people think you should believe we should have lots of friends, that we can go to anything. Some might believe that you should have one friend and that's enough to have a fulfilling life. Thoughts on friendships?
Yeah. I certainly don't believe that you need to have like hundreds of friends. I certainly don't believe you need to have. I think you need to have friends that. I think it's about the quality of friendship, and what that is defined by. So
Yeah.
probably I'd say, and in fact I would say quality, because I don't even like that word. Strength of a friendship, depth of a friendship.
That's good.
What is it? What does that look like? Well, for me, it looks like someone who gives you undivided attention when you're with them, if that's what required. It's two-way. There is respect. I think you can have lots of friendships with people on different levels, but ultimately, they need to, for me, pertain to those sort of really basic things of: do you respect that person? Are you going to listen to them? And are you going to be there when they need you? Probably really, but yeah, that doesn't need to be hundreds. And I do probably think that the older I've got, the less friends I need personally. Is that I know that actually, and also that I can do justice to. I think that's the other thing. Is like we only have a certain amount of time, so how many friendships can I actually maintain to a certain level? Which is something I personally have found really tough and still do. I still really struggle with that.
I think it's also, you have to think about the reciprocal nature. It's not just how can I live well with a friend, it's how can you live well as well with my contribution that I give you as a friend in a friendship. This is a two-way thing. And I think it's also, like you say, it's important that it's not a one size fits all. We all have different personalities, different tendencies. We all have different kind of levels in which we want to spend with other people. Some people like to spend more time on their own. It doesn't mean that they have lesser regard to that friendship or not. It's just how we work. But I think you're right, and I think the article goes into, it talks about Dunbar's number of friends. This is a British anthropologist that proposed this a long time ago, by the way. But he said you should have 5 close friends, 15 good friends, 50 friends who you'd invite to a party, and 150 acquaintances that you'd say hi and catch up with. But to me, that just sounded like a whole lot of people, and the thought of that initially fills me with dread of all those people I need to keep in contact with. But it really is an individual thing, and has your view on how many friends you should have changed over the years, do you think, Joe?
Again, I don't think it's like the view of number. I think coming at it with a number, I think my view of what friendship is has changed, and therefore, and on both sides, like what is it? What does it mean for me to be a good friend, and vice
Yeah.
versa? I think that's probably something that I've learned more about.
Yeah. So again, on friendships, leave us a message. What are your thoughts on this? We'd love to get your feedback on what you think about this subject. Do you think we should all have a similar sort of number, a similar sort of quality of relationships, or is it individual to the person? We'd love to find your comments there. And the last thing which we released today actually was all about. This is an interesting one, I think. So being number one and the benefits of being number three. So a lot of the messaging that we see every day through social media and everything is all about striving for being number one. You be number one in this, be number one in that. But my feeling is, number three is pretty good. Number 20 in a field is bloody good, So, the article speaks around some of the pros and cons of being at the top and people have experienced from losing other areas in their life when they have to have that level of intensity in regards to striving for that number one space. But thoughts around this, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's personally, I think it's unhealthy to think you have to be number one. But I would say that that's a view that I have changed definitely from being something. I'm a hugely competitive person when it comes to sport, and with a lot of areas of my life personally, I've always been massively in sport. I always want to win, and I don't make any is it bones? I don't bring any bones about that, or what the phrase is.
We'll go with bones.
But I think that it's lonely at the top, is what I've learned from not my own experience, really, working with leaders, leaders who will share that readily. That actually the expectation that they feel is on them to do a certain thing, when actually that isn't the case. And so my view is that it isn't about being number one. It's about feeling like you're not alone, and that even if you are at the top of an organisation, that it doesn't all rest on your shoulders. But my view personally is, God, it's much more fun when you're not number one, and life is much easier. And but that's all down to you, and whether you can let go of what that means for yourself.
I also think that kind of not setting that precedent, it kind of helps with collaboration, I think, sometimes as well, because I think if you're striving for number one, the sense I get from that is that you're striving to be alone and above others in that respect, where in my own experience, the times that I have been at a point where I can collaborate with others on a subject or a project or that kind of thing, I get more out of that. I get more learning, I get insights on different things. There's so much more that I get from that, rather than sort of putting myself above others. And like all these things we're talking about today, if you're listening, if this other approach works for you, that's amazing, and we full-heartedly kind of encourage that. But for those of you that don't, who might feel like us from time to time, I think these are important conversations to have around some of these things. Right, we're really nearly out of time, so I just want to say thank you so much, Joe. It's been great to have a chat with you. We're going to try and do these every week. Stay with us. We're going to try and, if anything, we just want to start conversations on some of these matters. And if you feel like us about some of these things, there are some more of us around, so we should stick together on these sorts of things. If you want to catch us, go to livegoodenough.com. What you can find on there is you can just go on there, subscribe. You'll get the email with each article each day, and get all that. And you can look for us on Instagram as well at Live Good Enough Now. But until next week, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.